All right, AP Human Geography, let's finish this off. We don't have much left. Think about the time I was getting cut off in both classes with the bell. We were talking about this concept of infrastructure, and especially the idea of a lot of old infrastructure in many countries, ours definitely included. Think about the time we were getting cut off with our time. Um, was talking a bit about the fact that the bridges that we have connecting Portland and Vancouver across the Columbia River at Interstate 5 are all extremely old and have been identified as being a high risk in case of earthquake, that those bridges would not take much of a significant earthquake to probably bring those bridges down or make them unusable. Both states realize that they need to be rebuilt, but it's going to be, I think the estimates are well over $1 billion. It might be into multiples there, but I mean it is a vast amount of money. And Washington and Oregon have been negotiating for a while now to figure out how to pay for that, and that's where things get sticky. When one state says, well, more of your cars travel it than our cars, so you should pay more, and and it goes round and round. And a lot of times those are the kind of issues that are gonna pop up, and especially when you talk about a federal system where we operate with our individual states, and they have a lot of local control. That definitely gets a little problematic when it comes to that question of who pays. All right. Other political issues that we have in cities have to do with both the informal and what we call shadow economy, and the definition pretty much provided for you there. It's whether it is people who kind of set up on the streets to sell things, maybe people who set up kind of just temporary stalls in a street market kind of a thing. But a lot of times they fall outside of the formal economy in that they're not paying taxes necessarily. The products that they're selling aren't really being regulated, so they might not be safe. It's that kind of stuff. And it also can involve what we refer to as like the black market as well. And that is sometimes the sale of things that, well, in some cases might be counterfeit, whether it be clothing or purses, software. I mean, pretty much anything you can think of that is basically not being legitimately produced, is copied and then branded as if it was a big name product. All of that kind of fall into that informal and or shadow economy as well. All right, environmental problems that we see in cities. We definitely have an impact on the natural environment, and the cities that we build have an impact. A few things we can talk about real quick here, and you'll find some of these on your vocab sheet. Urban canyons is the idea that if you're ever like in a big city, I think I've experienced this in places like New York and Chicago and up in Seattle even. We've got a lot of really tall buildings, and you get wind that starts going in between the buildings, and it kind of gets a life of its own. The basically just the idea of these tall buildings on either side of the road kind of creates these man-made canyons, and so it channels wind and then can just really intensify it, and make what would be just kind of a nice little breeze into a pretty good moving wind that will whip through the streets. Urban flooding is just kind of what it sounds like when drains clog up, and so you end up with streets that end up flooding. And then urban heat islands. And that is the idea, the concept that a lot of times in, whether it's a CBD, whether it's like in a commercial zone or maybe an industrial zone, that when you have a lot of concentrated buildings in an area, it does kind of create its own heat. And that also has sometimes to do with the fact that, when you're in the middle of maybe a built up urban area, a city, also a lot of asphalt, which tends to absorb heat as well, just from the streets. And so those are all things that can have some impacts on the natural environment in their own little ways. There's a heat island right there. Okay. visualized, I guess. Um, Urban wildlife is also an issue that can come up in cities, especially things like rats and some birds like pigeons. Feral animals are like basically like wild cats or dogs that can sometimes kind of travel around, and especially dogs kind of in packs, that kind of a thing. And so those can get lumped in there as well. I know where I'm at down in Portland, even though I'm technically in the city, we have quite a problem in my neighborhood with coyotes that are in and around. I've bumped into them many times myself when I'm out taking an early morning run. And it's like, oh, there's a dog. Never mind, that's not a dog. Yeah, so urban wildlife is definitely a thing. All right, and then pollution in the form of air, and typically this just coming from especially in a condensed, dense urban area, especially from car traffic, sometimes from some industry, but polluting the air, creating smog, which can sometimes create basically health emergencies where people, where cities and municipalities have to issue warnings telling people that they should limit their amount of time outside because of poor air quality and the impacts it can have on someone's health, especially if they already have, kind of a compromised respiratory system, something like that. And then you also get pollution from water runoff. If we're talking about some of that urban flooding, can create pollution of itself, and standing water that ends up not being dealt with can contribute to things like mosquitoes and other kind of flying insects that can carry disease and things like that. So some other impacts there. All right, urban sprawl. This is we call this an environmental problem because, well, when you get a picture like you see there, which is a good view of what urban sprawl can be. This is when we have that kind of that growth of suburbs, and where it kind of, I mean, it's planned and it's not. I mean, it really, the idea usually of urban sprawl is you're just trying to pack as many people into a limited area as you possibly can. You're not thinking about livability. You're literally thinking about, we need to house a lot of humans. And so, that's where you see some of your housing developments where the homes are only, maybe about seems like only, 5-6 feet apart from each other, where you're literally, there's hardly enough room in between two houses to barely kind of squeeze yourself. It's that thing. And urban sprawl is kind of like, the poster child for, just how ugly urbanization can get. And usually when we hear that term, we kind of we can kind of associate that with just not a lot of either not a lot of good planning, or or really just not very creative planning. Again, when you just go back to the idea that, hey, we just gotta pack these people in. That's kind of some of the downside of urban sprawl, and just packing people in, condensing people like that. Again, it's just another cause of more pollution and and that kind of stuff. So anyhow, that'll cover you on that. All right, and then I think our last section that we cover here is sustainability. And so trying to keep things, well, there's your word, the viability is what you want to think about. How do we keep things going in such a way where an urban area is still going to be productive, is going to be focused on limiting things like pollution, trying to limit urban sprawl, and trying to do those over a long term, not just, let's just try to fix this kind of a five-year band-aid. This is kind of the looking down the road, the future, the long road. Green belts is something that first really took hold in Europe, and Europe definitely still has an edge over the United States when it comes to the use of green belts. And like the picture you see over there, this is where we build into a plan where we have urban areas, and especially suburban areas. So when we get out there into the peripheries where all the residential zones are, and it's the idea of deliberately building in areas where maybe you have areas of forest that, while you're clear cutting to develop an area for neighborhoods. You have areas that you deliberately do not cut. You let the trees stay, and you keep them there. That is in effect what a green belt is. It's kind of this belt, so to speak, of land that either you're going to leave trees up, or you're going to develop it so that it's grass and and shrubs and bushes and some of that. I mean, it is the idea that you're going to keep some of the natural environment around, and some of that is for just kind of the general beautification of a development. And some of it is also that, I mean, when you get right down to it, that undeveloped land, trees and plants and stuff like that, those produce oxygen, and we kind of need that stuff. And so, like I said, Europeans really embraced this starting, well, I mean, many years ago. And in a lot of newer developments in the United States, especially when it is well planned and it's just not that urban sprawl, are beginning to make use of more and more green belts. Okay, and then smart growth is kind of the generally more or less kind of the same idea. It's kind of like where it is the opposite of urban sprawl. It's where there's a plan. And it's building new developments that maybe have a small park in the middle of them for families with little kids. It's developments that have a community center in the middle of them that people can use as a gathering place. So there is a little bit more sense of community, and it's just not a collection of homes. Those kinds of ideas, right? New urbanism is this idea of mixed use neighborhoods, which is the idea of starting to kind of try to spread things out a little bit more. A little bit more of a combination of some homes, some businesses. Livable can be defined in a lot of different ways. It could be so that people don't have to drive a long distance to get to a store or a restaurant. And so with new urbanism, there is this kind of this thinking of trying to mix those things a little bit more so together, so that maybe people don't have to drive. Maybe they can even walk to get to some of these places instead of always having to get into a car. And so, you can think about it that way, all right, as kind of one aspect of it. And then urban infill. This is when we identify areas in urban settings, in cities where maybe you have an empty lot, kind of like the picture you see over there, an empty lot that has been sitting empty for 2 years, 5 years. I know I see a lot of those in different places around Portland, where it's just kind of like there's just an empty lot. There's buildings on either side, but you don't know. It's like, was there something there and it burned down? Has it always just been sitting empty? But urban infill is the idea of making use of that land, making practical use of that land. And whether it's being able to produce, if you can build a 4-unit little mini apartment in there, or townhouses or something, and provide housing for 4 people, 4 families, well, then you do that. Or if maybe you're in a food desert and you can maybe a city can coax a developer into wanting to put a grocery store, maybe give them some good tax breaks to be able to do that. Anyhow, that's kind of the concept of urban infill, is finding parts of an urban setting or a city that, where there is available land and that is just sitting, and trying to come up with a plan to do something with it. Okay, exurbanism is what we've been seeing here lately, and tying in with some of the other concepts we've been talking about, and just the whole idea of especially in this time now of remote learning and all that kind of business, or remote learning, remote work. Bleh. And so, yeah, when we see people who are leaving the cities and heading out either to the suburbs or to rural areas, that kind of thing, exurbanism is the term that we can use there, right? Or just to keep it nice and confusing, counter-urbanization or de-urbanization, all kind of different ways you can describe the same thing. But it is a concept of people who've been living in the city and are making a decision to get out. They're not moving to another city. They are getting out of the urban area. And yeah, like I said, most time just because people can, they can work from home. And then exurbs is kind of when you look beyond. I mean, this is going like beyond the periphery. I don't know. The picture there maybe kind of gives you the idea there that, getting out into, not really out into rural country, because you're right outside of a city, but it's where there is more property that's available. And the exurbs tend to be these areas where people, and typically wealthier people, if we're going to be really honest, are able to build fairly large homes and a little bit more spread out. They might own a couple acres and build a home. It's kind of like these are the homes with five bedrooms, 4-car garage, got their own tennis court or, basketball court out in the back, the pool, that kind of a thing. And so those areas where you see those developments, usually of, the kind of wealthier homes, properties, that is your exurbs, all right? And then everything else we'll cover here. I'm just going to pop some of this stuff up. There we go. Yeah, these are some other things that we've seen popping up in a lot of cities here in the last about 20 years, making areas that are pedestrian only, so blocking off some streets, maybe where there's a lot of retail, a lot of restaurants, just to encourage people to come down and, not always have to be concerned about, crossing the road and looking for cars and, this, that, and the other. So these pedestrian zones that no cars are allowed, dedicated bicycle lanes, and we have a lot of those down here in Portland because they like to think of themselves as kind of bicycling city. One it reminds me of is Eugene, also, man, big on the bikes. And anyhow, yeah, they literally have carved space out of car lanes so that there is room off to the side for bicycle lanes. And there's other cities that have done the same to, number one, to encourage bicycle use, bicycle commuting, just to alleviate some more of that pollution coming from cars, and to give people just kind of healthier lifestyle choices when it comes to, getting from place to place. Not everyone commutes to work on bicycling. A lot of people just do it for fun and, bicycling clubs and that kind of thing. Running paths and community gardens. Let's see a little bit of both those down here in Portland. Maybe some of you have them up in your area, but we have some paths that are kind of dual bicycle and for walking, running, and kind of run along the Willamette River. And we're seeing more of that kind of thing in urban areas where there's and I think, I think about some of the new development they're doing in downtown Vancouver, down along the Columbia River. Also has kind of some, I don't know if running paths, but walking paths down there that are, nice scenic view of the river and the bridges and all that sort of thing. And so another one of those areas that kind of gets into, livability, walkability, all that kind of thing. Community gardens, these are where, yeah, you pop up a garden space, and sometimes maybe some of that infill could be used for something like this. And then people who living nearby who want to participate, you subdivide it into little lots so that people can grow maybe a little bit of veggies or, maybe some berries or something like that. And it builds community, because people kind of come together to do this kind of stuff. It gives you some of that green so that, you've got some plants going. And a lot of times these community gardens, they grow a lot of stuff. They'll donate to food banks and, helping the needy and people who are having food shortage issues. Farmers markets, kind of something that really in the last 20, 30 years has really taken off. And this does allow, this kind of crosses over into our Unit 5 as well, because this also allows for some of our agricultural folks to come into an urban area and sell their product, sell their crops, their produce, to city folks who are a lot of times eager to get food that they know is coming direct from the farm, not necessarily being processed from some kind of a big commercial farm or something like that. There's a little bit something to be said when you're buying tomatoes or apples from the person who actually grew them, and handing your money over to them, and and they can tell you all about it. All right. Okay, And that's it. That's it. No, that's enough. There you go. That'll cover us for Unit 6. One more to go, kids, and we're going to get it done before test day. Trust me. We'll be heading off to industry. Yes, the industrial world to figure things out, or to finish things off, and we'll be taking a look at, the Industrial Revolution and factories and all that kind of good stuff. And so that's what's left. All right, you got it all. Till next time. See ya.